The United States has landed on the moon many times, most notably during the Apollo program, but today we're looking for the third landing by a U.S. commercial company enabled under NASA's CLIPS initiative. Ahead of these important milestones, let's discuss the challenges of landing on the moon through CLIPS. Take a look.
Landing on the moon is hard. We're going back. Landing on the moon is hard. We're going back. Under this Artemis program,
Now, we're buying the service of delivery of our lunar payloads to the surface of the moon.
it is a delivery service, akin to a delivery service that you'd have here on Earth.
NASA will provide payloads to a commercial company. They decide how to get it to the moon. They have to develop their own lander, but they also have to manage the entire end-to-end mission.
It's meant to provide affordable, rapid, frequent access to the lunar surface through American companies.
We're funding different companies.
We have commercial companies that are competing to win task orders to deliver our payloads to the surface of the moon.
One of the goals when we started CLIPS was to help establish a lunar economy.
Somebody has to do it first, and then it becomes commercially available. Then they're able to crank them up. Then they're able to make it more affordable. And so the lunar surface is just the next frontier for a commercial environment.
But we had to acknowledge up front, all the way through the highest levels of the agency leadership, that some of them will fail. These missions may not be as successful as a traditional NASA mission.
We have accepted the risk that going through this innovative approach with these commercial companies, that there could be some failures. Some of them are new companies. None of them have ever successfully landed on the surface of the moon. So they're going to learn lessons.
We need to give our vendors the opportunity to learn.
And so that'll help ultimately buy down our risk as these companies learn, okay, what does it take to actually build up the lunar lander, integrate payloads, get to the lunar surface and land safely.
They've been able to demonstrate that they have very, very good technical depth and the ability to design and execute missions. We're willing to take more shots on goal. We aren't risking human lives. And in the big picture, if we're flying missions at 1/10 of the cost of a NASA mission and we fail 2 of them, we still get 8 missions for that same price.
Even with 1 or 2 or 3 failures, this is still a very economical proposition. It's a risk posture which is more risk tolerant than NASA is accustomed to. There's not a single one of these companies that's willing to bet their mission on a coin toss. Every one of them is doing what they can in order to have the most successful mission possible. But the important thing to realize is that risk tolerant does not mean risky. And the rewards are a long-term ability to get payloads to the moon inexpensively, frequently, and rapidly.
We want science, so we can then put more of our resources on even more science, exploration, and technology payloads and get more of a return on investment when we get to the moon.
CLIPS provides tremendous benefit across the scientific and economic communities.
So there's a lot we'd like to learn about the moon to help human habitation and prepare us for missions to Mars and beyond.
So the moon is the first step.
We are coming up on just about 22 minutes from Athena's planned lunar landing attempt. Let's take a live look into Nova Control. Josh, can you tell us what's going on right now inside your Mission Control Center?
Well, flight controllers are all monitoring Athena's flight data in near real time. That means Athena is sending data from nearly 250,000 miles away to ground stations contracted by Intuitive Machines across the globe and into Nova Control. The mission director and landing system experts are looking at a screen called the Deorbit Descent and Landing, or DDL screen. It's used primarily while Athena orbits the moon through to landing. That same data flow is being interpreted through a video game engine to create what we call the Viz that you see on your screen right now. Well, we have made some improvements to increase the fidelity and reliability of the Viz. We expect to keep it up for you during the landing, although the last few seconds may be an estimation of what's happening, as Athena may lose communications contact, particularly when she pitches over right before vertical descent.
Right now, looking at the Viz, it shows Athena approximately 15 kilometers above the lunar surface, so we're getting close. Now, when the lander makes it down to about 10 kilometers, we expect Athena Athena to continuously fire her main engine, throttling down until softly landing on the lunar surface.
And Leah, that final burn is called Powered Descent Initiation, or PDI. Athena must slow down by about 1,800 meters per second, which doesn't mean too much until we typed it into Google. That's about 4,000 miles per hour. That's because she's approaching her landing site coming down from orbit, so she has a lot of lateral speed. You can think of PDI like hitting the brakes on your car in order to make a safe turn. But in Athena's case, that turn is moving into a vertical upright position to start descending down to the lunar surface. PDI should be starting here just in about 6 minutes, I believe. Leah?
The teams here in Nova Control have been working diligently over the past 7-8 days to take us this far. Now, again, only 15 kilometers above the lunar surface. We're following the countdown to Athena's landing attempt, but for now, we're heading back over to Tony Jaramillo, who is standing by with NASA's acting administrator, Janet Petro. Tony?
Thanks, Leah. It's always an honor to be joined by NASA leadership, and joining us now is Acting Administrator Janet Petro. Janet, we're getting, 20 minutes until landing. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling super excited. I got a little nervous, fingers crossed, toes crossed, but looking forward to it.
Absolutely. I have everything crossed too. Can you tell us a little bit more about the challenges of landing on the moon, especially for these uncrewed robotic spacecraft?
Yeah, so even, you mentioned these are uncrewed, but even back in the Apollo days, the 7 times we landed on the moon, it was very, very challenging, required a whole bunch of simulations and demonstrations to get that right. And so for the uncrewed, so each lander is unique, so each is developed differently, and the harshness of the environment with no atmosphere, the dust that's going to spring up when it lands, all these conditions make it really, really hard to do it right and get it right. And so one thing I found from the Firefly from last week, all these companies know how hard it is. Their own technology, they've got to have precise propulsion and navigation systems to get them right down on the surface, and it's all automated. We're 238,000 miles away from Earth, so there's no real-time control, so that the systems have got to work perfectly together. So these companies, that they support each other, and I started to say we were at Firefly, and several of the other companies sent them in coffee and donuts because they know how stressful it is for the team as they're coming in for a landing to make it, and hopefully it'll go right. But it is really, really hard to make sure that all the systems are working seamlessly and perfectly, and that as they get closer and closer to the lunar surface, that the rugged terrain that they're about to land on, it all works out. And the South Pole is increasingly challenging with the very, very deep craters that are there. The low level of light and the angle of the sun make that even more challenging. So it's harsh. It's harsh.
It absolutely is, and it's just even more impressive when the teams then are able to land, well. Janet, can you tell us how these commercial then lunar flights that are part of the agency's CLIPS initiative, how are they helping us then in our own Artemis missions when we send humans back to the moon?
Yeah, so I consider them part of the way bigger Artemis missions as we're going back to the moon and then on to Mars, that we talk about all the time. And so CLIPS, the Commercial Lunar Payload Services, I just think it's a brilliant partnership between NASA and innovative companies to come up with their own concepts and ideas and help put forth science and instruments earlier than we're going to be able to get humans on the moon. And we'll be able to learn a lot from these instruments and payloads that we're deploying. Things like, the water ice. Maybe we can find some water ice. Different roving mobility techniques. Of course, looking at all the lunar resources and the drilling, drill baby drill that we're going to do on this mission. So all of that we're going to be able to apply to Artemis when we get humans back on the surface of the moon, and then as we go out to Mars. And again, I think CLIPS is a brilliant partnership. And I mentioned, I believe this administration talks about America first, and I think the way we can do it is by bringing along industry and really dominating the space, whether it's low Earth orbit, whether it's cislunar, or whether it's on the surface of the moon. I think we will continue to push boundaries and make sure that we are first and retain leadership in space.
A lot of exciting science ahead. Janet, thank you so much for joining us today. Now we'll send it back to Leah and Josh.
Thanks, Antonia. It's time to buckle up, space fans, or lean forward in your chair. We just heard the call out for 90 seconds for time of ignition for PDI. Let's go ahead and open up those operational channels so that folks at home can listen as we go in towards PDI, Leah. That's a braking burn coming out of orbit, trying to slow down about 4,000 miles per hour.
Yeah, PDI stands for Powered Descent Initiation. So this is really that final commitment that we are coming in for landing. And everything is really going to happen in rapid succession after this 11-minute burn, now just 60 seconds away. The rest of the sequence is only about 2 minutes to touchdown. Can you break that down for us, Josh?
That's right. It's going to be rather quick after we get through this PDI maneuver. You're going to hear things call out for 45 seconds. After PDI, we'll have pitch over, HDA, vertical descent, and then landing operations. We're just now inside about 30 seconds, standing by for that time of ignition for PDI. 30 seconds.
And with 30 seconds, we are now 13 kilometers above the moon. Again, we're going to bring it back down to 10 and start that burn.
We might be
AFM is in exec mode.
I was just about to say, we're listed for exec mode here.
15
seconds.
RCS settling burn.
Settling burn. That's our attitude control system.
Ignition commanded.
Ignition and main stage.
All right, let's go ahead and start our stopwatches here.
Cameras are running.
We'll be listening for that max thrust.
AFM mode is breaking 1.
Chamber pressures look nominal.
Good calls. They're not going in at 100% here, Leah. They're going in about 90% in case they need a little bit more oomph on this braking burn.
Again, this is about
good control.
About an 11-minute burn, but the engine does not cut off at the end of this burn. It just continues to throttle down until we land softly on the lunar surface.
And we're listening in to hear some good confirmations of data. If you hear good confirmation of data, that means that that data is making its way to the viz, what you're watching right now on your screen. We do expect to lose some of those communications, especially during that pitch over maneuver at the end of PDI. That's when the lander will be changing its attitude and maybe those antennas aren't pointed directly back to Earth. It's something we expect, something we plan for, but one thing that's unique to the lunar south pole is what's called multipath, and that's when you have radio waves reaching their intended destination back at Earth after they're taking a different route, maybe bouncing off a crater or a ridge. So we do expect less than optimal radio signals on the surface, but that's something we have to plan for, and it's something that's reflected inside the viz here. So if the viz does lose communications, it's going to continue moving in its last estimated vector. So folks at home, you might be seeing the lander touch down on the surface, but the ultimate call of confirmation and what is happening is going to come from that mission director seat. You see it in the small box on the bottom right hand of your screen. That's Dr. Tim Crane in the mission director seat today.
Coming up on 1 minute and 45 seconds since the start of the burn, again, an 11-minute burn using the main engine aboard Athena. And if you're watching the viz and it looks like Athena is traveling parallel essentially to the lunar surface, that's because it is. This is a braking burn. Confirmation 2 minutes in, and a better picture on the viz that shows just
Chamber pressure still nominal.
Continuing to get good calls, but the next step will be pitch over. So during that pitch over time frame, Athena will begin to upright itself and prepare to descend down to the lunar surface and also activate HDA, or hazard detection and avoidance. Can you break that down for us too?
Yeah, we touched on this at the top of the show, Leah. We are going in at about 450 meters for PDI versus our originally planned 400 meters, and that's because we had some uncertainty and variability within the recent landing measurements, going in about 50 meters higher, allowing those flight controllers to manually confirm and screen alternative measurements. But we do expect that our estimated landing time will stay closer towards that estimated 11:30 Central Time. That's 12:30 Eastern. And right now we're standing by, just about to hit 3 minutes into this burn. We're listening
3
for...
minutes in.
There it is. How about that? And we're listening in to hear for things about how many kilometers uprange we may be. We know this braking burn will continue to happen until about 2 kilometers from our intended landing site. Now, that intended landing site is where Athena...
Still processing good depause.
Hey, that's a good call. All right, folks at home, that depause is that delta position, meaning the lander is taking pictures in flight, and she's comparing those 2 pictures together to determine how much have I moved and figure out how fast did I get there in order to affirm that Athena's going in the right direction, making the right moves going forward. Another good thing about depause, we're getting good comm. So on your screen at home and you're looking at the Viz, you're looking at, what is this, about 16 meters. That may be off. About 16 meters. We'll stand by for a call out to confirm maybe altitude as well as distance to the landing site. But if they're getting good depause, they have good comm. Again, we do expect, plan, and train for a loss of comm right around the pitch over time frame, and maybe also as well as we descend towards the lunar surface, making sure that our radios and antennas are in the right config.
490 seconds left in the burn.
490 seconds left in the burn. That's code for, we've been burning for about 4 minutes, Leah. We'll stand by to try to get some more data and call outs here, maybe some kilometers up range as well as the mixture ratio, trying to figure out the vehicle's performance, that mixture of liquid methane and liquid oxygen going into the engine. Let's take a second and listen in to flight controllers here.
GNC 174 acknowledged.
It's a different mode inside of the guidance, navigation, and control software called out from Michaela Landivar, if I'm not
Chamber
mistaken.
pressures and temperatures still nominal.
Nominal temperatures. This
450 seconds left in the braking.
450 seconds left in a braking.
5 minutes in.
Code for 5 minutes in.
Again, this is a braking burn, the powered descent initiation, really committing us to our final descent. Earlier this morning, we had the DOI, or the descent orbit insertion, which got us out of lunar orbit itself. And since then, Athena has been completely autonomous. So Josh, is there anything right now that flight controllers can still command on the spacecraft?
That's a good point. I mean, there is an autonomous process that is bringing Athena from descent orbit insertion, triggering powered descent initiation, and then through to the lunar surface. Flight controllers do have a few options to manually intervene. We talked about allowing a little bit of extra time with that additional 50 meters for
400
PDI.
seconds left in braking.
400 seconds left in braking. We're almost up on 6 minutes inside of this burn. But that extra 50 meters is allowing flight controllers to manually confirm and screen alternative measurements, as we did have a little bit of uncertainty and variability with recent landing measurements. By my count, we're just crossing about 6 minutes, Leah.
That means we're
GNC
over.
175 acknowledged.
Another guidance, navigation, and control mode call out there.
We are over halfway into this 11-minute burn using the main engine on Athena.
AFM is in braking 2.
Braking 2, progressing through that PDI count, Leah.
350 seconds left in braking.
350 seconds left in braking, just crossing over the 6.5-minute mark since PDI, powered descent initiation. This is one continuous burn from PDI all the way down to the surface.
VFM mode is depause only.
All right, we're still processing delta position. Those are camera measurements the lander is looking at and making decisions. One of those decisions will be using hazard detection to fly to an intended landing region and then autonomously make those decisions of a safe site, whether that's safe from boulders or steep slopes. We'll hear those call outs after we pitch over. You'll hear HDA, and that's what we're listening for to figure out where those hazards are and choose a new landing site.
Now over 7 minutes into the burn, this braking burn,
300 seconds left in braking.
specifically 300 seconds left, this braking burn,
Engine is still healthy.
and great confirmation about the engine itself. That engine is bringing
GNC
us
176 acknowledged.
from about 4,000 miles per hour to eventually a soft about 1 meter per second, or about 3 feet per second landing.
And I'm catching a little jitters watching the Viz here, so I think folks at home will be seeing the same thing. Remember, this is data being streamed down from a lander that's braking about 4,000 miles per hour, trying to feed that data back 250,000 miles away.
TAL is EBNO at 5 dB.
Just to enjoy a little view.
8 minutes elapsed.
Camera's now in breaking 2 mode.
We are still inside of PDI, breaking 2 mode.
250 seconds left in braking.
So we cross over 8 minutes into this burn.
Again, about an 11-minute burn. We don't expect the engine to reach full 100% thrust. It's really a throttled approach. This engine is designed to continuously burn in throttle all the way from power descent initiation, which began 8 minutes and 30 seconds ago, through touchdown. This approach is very similar to what we saw for the Apollo descent modules as well.
And it makes a lot of sense. If you go in at 100% and you need a little more, there's nothing left to give, right? We want to come in nominally around 90% and then have a little bit of room to play if we do need to increase the speed of which we're slowing down. You'll hear folks maybe call out the rate of acceleration, but in this case, for us, that's
9
deceleration.
minutes elapsed.
Crossing over 9 minutes.
200 seconds left in braking.
Yes, just a couple of minutes left in the braking burn, so another look forward to that rapid succession of events that'll come immediately after braking is complete. We will see pitch over begin. We'll be using those 4 RCS, or reaction control system thrusters, at the top of the spacecraft to reorient Athena before its a final approach, vertical descent, and terminal descent.
And all of those after PDI, Leah, that you just called out, we're expecting those to happen rapidly. We can kind of sit back and let flight controllers really get into what's happening. We'll take a few chances in between to help. There's a LOS on one of the radio systems, again, expected as we get in towards our pitch over maneuver. Some jitters on the viz.
Quasonics still showing good data.
That's the second radio. So the first one,
Good data on Quasonics.
the first one we heard a loss of
GNC
signal.
177 acknowledged.
The second was a confirmation that the
10 minutes
second
in.
radio, we still have signal. So it's good signal, good data, good viz, and we're watching the show here along with the folks at home.
10 minutes into the burn, so expecting just about a minute more until the end of this braking maneuver.
We expect and plan for pitch over just about 2 kilometers away from the intended landing site. That gives Athena a little bit of time to pitch over and start looking forward using her navigation sensors to detect different hazards, as well as her altitude, to lower down to the lunar surface at approximately 1 meters per second if all goes towards plan. There's LOS as we approach our pitch over. All right, we're approaching 11 minutes into the burn. Local time is 11:26.
AOS on Quasonics.
11 minutes in.
11 minutes in, we heard another call out that we're up on Quasonics. That's a radio system. It's 11:26 local. I'm looking at a pitch over time at 11:27 in about 52 seconds. So we are coming up over to the pitch over where we expect to have some loss of comms. Earlier we talked about multipath. That is very unique to the lunar South Pole, where our radio signals are using multiple ways to get to the same destination, whether that's from bouncing off the harsh terrain or some different polarity issues down there on the South Pole. We expect to have a weaker than normal signal, but we still want to make sure we get that confirmation, Leah. As part of that confirmation, we're going to safe the vehicle, figure out the status there, and then start working on pictures after everything's safe. Maybe around 2 hours after landing, we can cherish that photo.
LOS on Quasonics.
There's that loss of signal on one of the radio systems. We approach 12 minutes into PDI.
Again, the engine will continue to fire, albeit it will continue throttling down as we approach the lunar surface. And a reminder, the VIS is a simulation based on flight data, but if we do lose contact with the lander, which can be expected based on the conditions at the lunar South Pole, we will continue to see projected data on this visualization.
And we're approaching G as in ground to 2 minutes. We expect to drop this clock here in 2 minutes and take all of our commands from inside of Nova Control. The bottom right hand of your screen, that's Dr. Tim Crane, our co-founder and Chief Growth Officer, also sitting in as Mission Director for landing this IM-2 mission. Standing by for the latest information. Let's wait one.
Quasonics AOS.
HRN, HGA, HGA2.
Thales AOS.
60 seconds left in braking.
60 seconds left in braking.
And approach. Landing site selected.
Engine and idle.
11 meters cross range, divert.
Quasonics LOS.
There's that loss of signal over pitch over. Stand by, see if we regain that signal. Remember, folks, the viz that you're watching at home is an estimation of data. It's doing its best. That's a lot of data coming from really far away. All commands and all
Initiated
confirmations
pre-divert.
come from our mission director at the bottom right hand of your screen.
Again, we are standing by, monitoring the viz just as you are at home, along with Nova Control.
We are approaching approximately the time that we estimated Athena would touch down on the surface. We did hear a call out for a Quasonics LOS. That is our radio system, something we expect to happen at pitch over. That's prior to a vertical descent and terminal descent. That latest
How
data
are we doing on signal?
is what you're seeing on the viz. Why don't we go?
We currently are getting our uplink through Hemi 2, and we have a healthy AGC value, so our uplink is coming in strong for Thales. And then for our downlink, we have a strong EBNO at 17 on Green Hilly, and we are currently not seeing our Quasonics. So we are in Quasonics LOS.
All right, that's a
See our
Quasonics.
signal strong on the spectrum for Thales. I'm not seeing our Quasonics on our spectrum as of yet.
FM, what mode are we in?
Approach 17 is the last we've seen.
All right, so that's up on one radio, and they do have a loss of signal in the second.
Fido, I'm looking at the SenseXL. Do you see the SenseXL reading?
Let me look.
That's the mission director detecting CF
I
the
am
lander.
seeing eSenseXL 1G.
So that was the mission director, Tim Crane, trying to figure out what is the vehicle sensing. It has two inertial measurement units on board. You can think of those as your inner ear. So when he's asking what is the sensed acceleration, that's what he's asking for, is what is that inertial measurement unit, that inner ear, detecting as far as acceleration.
Again, as we've mentioned, the viz here is just an interpretation of landing.
Yeah, let's go ahead and stay on Nova Control. Looks like the viz is hovering. We can't.
Prop, what are you seeing on the engine?
The engine is still in idle at min thrust. We are still seeing chamber pressure.
So we're getting good data. We heard that we have one radio up, one radio loss of signal. We just heard that we
I'm
have.
seeing guidance to solution for time to go as increasing, just indicating to me that it is the onboard nav state is not decreasing in altitude.
The good news, the HRN laser is now ready to fire.
So we heard that we have one good radio sending down data, one that has loss of signal. We have prop.
Standing by with a manual command for landed ops.
Yep.
No recommendation at this time.
Yep, we have prop telling us that we have good data. That was someone just commanding. We heard exec mode to go into this firing mode and someone standing by to get into our landed ops mode. I'll wait for Dr. Crane to confirm here. But if we're pulling down data, we'll see how this goes. Looks like Tim's about ready to jump on the loop and sort out what we saw on the Viz versus what the folks inside of Mission Control are seeing on their monitors. It's a good reminder, too, this public channel that we're listening to here in the studio, Leah, and what people are listening to at home, at the landing party at Lone Star Flight Museum.
All right, folks. I'm showing that we are sensing lunar acceleration. So we're on the surface. Let's evaluate.
All right, let's continue to evaluate. I hear we do have a picture from a portion of the descent. Is that right over there? All right, so that's a picture during braking, about 10 kilometers up
MD,
from
this
the
is
lunar
prop on
surface that
IM1.
we do have while we wait
We
for a
can
little more
confirm the
information.
engine is still running and therefore needs to be upright. If we were in a different configuration, the engine would have snuffed.
Okay, so we have confirmation. I believe that was from Con that says the engine's still running. This picture you're looking at, the 10 kilometers up during that braking burn, that powered descent initiation, that long burn that brought us 4,000 miles per hour braking burn. Incredible shot.
Yeah, that's
there.
what I'm saying as well.
All right, there's another view there. Looks like from this panel, we're looking at the garage. So that's Lunar Outpost Map Rover inside of that square right there, Leah. And this looks like it's probably about the same altitude, maybe about 10 meters above the surface. And one more here for everyone. It's about the same altitude there, maybe a little bit more exposure, but these
Camera's still running in HRN mode.
These photos came down for us just a few moments ago. Wanted to share those before we jump back into Mission Control as flight controllers are looking at this dynamic situation and learning.
Yeah, go ahead and put us in landed ops. It looks like we're down. We need to evaluate that situation, and I'd like to get a picture.
As they say, picture it didn't happen.
LOS.
So Dr. Crane's onto it right there. A couple things here, Leah.
FM3402 was acknowledged. AOS on Thales.
What we're hearing in our ears and what folks at home are listening to are not the
Mode
only
20 landed
channels
ops. Check your systems.
that Mission
Engine
controllers
shutdown.
are working on. It's an engine shutdown notice. We'll see what comes out of this. But they're all on different loops having separate conversations, so all the information that we have, that folks have at home, isn't necessarily the exact vibe inside the room. So we'll stand by and listen in to see what we have here. I did hear Dr. Crane call out that they are getting readings for lunar
Folks are moving
acceleration.
to the post-landing court procedure.
All right, Spark, I'm going to start shutting some stuff off as soon as we can.
Copy. Can you meet me on my loop, please?
Feed lines are inerting.
All right, so if we have enough data to be inerting feed lines, that means the engine's no longer running, and it's a state to bleed off that extra pressure. This is part of that safing bit that we talked about earlier, Leah. Looks like our CEO, Steve Altimus, just stepped into the room. That's in the bottom right hand of the box here, talking to the mission director, Dr. Tim Crane. He just called out telling Spark to turn some things off. That's because we need to remain in a power positive state, Leah, getting that top deck solar array into a spot where we are able to charge, but sometimes you have to turn a few things off to make sure that you're charging and not just burning through that power. All right, by my countdown clock, it's been about 22 minutes since we started that PDI, Leah.
And again, we were anticipating landing at about 11:31 a.m. Central Time, 12:31 p.m. Eastern Time. It can get tricky with communications on the lander when you're in a...
Prop, do we have insight to tank pressure if we turn off the Mogies and the Iggies?
We would, yeah.
All right, that's code for the...
If you turn off Mogies, then we cannot inert or vent the tanks.
Yeah.
We can bring them back up though, right?
Yes,
How are my pressures?
they're low at this time.
Okay, turn off the Mogies and the Iggies.
Going.
Could we turn everything off except the vent valves?
Yes.
That would be everything except MV-103 and MV-303.
All right, all this activity is regarding the lander's propulsion system. They're going through deciding on how to vent it. We heard two things there, Leah. We heard MOGIs and IGGIs. That's our motor engine gimbal system, right? And our IGGI is our igniter. So they're working through the process of safing this engine. At the top of the show, we talked about the priorities after touchdown, and being safe was first, followed by pulling down some health status information, and then images. And then just about 3 minutes ago, we heard Dr. Crane go ahead and say,
FM-3403 acknowledged.
We'll prioritize images. It's just about 9 minutes after the expected landing. So let's hang tight and continue to watch this problem and challenges unfold inside of Mission Control. Each one going through, finding this challenge, each one getting solved here. It sounds like they're still working through venting the engine system.
Let's power off the Quasonics until we get a handle on what antenna we're going to pipe it through.
Copy. Quasonics is currently in idle mode.
Good enough, thank you.
Quasonics, that's our radio. There's 2 radio systems on the lander. It sounds like when we talk about that vehicle health status, we heard some things for prop. Vehicle health status includes being in a power positive state.
Spark 636 acknowledged.
So we are communicating, commanding the lander, and getting acknowledgments back that the lander is behaving as expected. So putting those things together while we wait for confirmation from Dr. Crane. We have an engine that is shut down. We are venting the engine.
Spark 637 acknowledged.
We are getting acknowledged commands from the lander. Standing by for confirmation from Dr. Crane.
And just a recap of some of the timelines so far today, we had power descent initiation start about 25 minutes ago.
FM-3406 acknowledged.
Power descent initiation is the braking burn that really committed us to coming down to our landing site today. We were targeting landing at about 11:30 a.m. Central Time, so about 10 minutes ago now. Again, still just standing by for some confirmation from the teams in Nova Control, and hopefully a picture that shows the status of Athena on the lunar surface. Landing site today is Mons Mouton. It is the furthest south target for any landing up into this point.
And pretty credible images we just went through. You know, for those to come down during
Spark 638 acknowledged.
During that landing sequence, showing during that deceleration burn, just about 10 meters, I believe that was, over the surface for those images. See who we have in there. Yep, down towards the bottom right-hand side.
Spark 639 acknowledged.
Of your screen, we keep hearing those acknowledgments of the vehicle receiving our commands as we stand by for the real deciding factor here. Never a dull moment, Leah.
We did hear that they were going into
Spark 640 acknowledged.
Commanded landed ops. So can you walk us through some of what that means? I know that includes safing the engine as well.
Right, so there's different modes that we need to command, right? At the beginning of PDI, we hear the command for exec mode, all right?
Spark 641 acknowledged.
That's executing the burn maneuver, right? When we switch over into landed ops, it's a different setting on the lander in order for us to go through those steps, safing the vehicle first and foremost, that liquid methane, liquid oxygen engine.
Yep, bring it down. Also, FM, I'd like a recommendation on whether or not we keep Talos 1 up or if we bring it down.
It's going to be a decision on up and down for radios based on
Yeah, bring it down for now. We're taking the same pictures.
I would not recommend powering down Talos.
He did say pictures.
He did say pictures, yes. So hoping to see the status of Athena on the lunar surface soon. We were initially expecting pictures would take a couple of hours to come down as the flight teams prioritized downloading data and safing the vehicle, but this will help us better understand the configuration of the lander.
Spark 642 acknowledged.
Every time we hear Michaela come on the tunes
Order,
there,
can you zoom in on this view? Actually, give me the spacecraft view.
Spark 644 acknowledged.
getting all these acknowledgements coming through.
No, take task down.
All right, we're going to see here. Looks like Tim's
Star
got a good
tracker's
spot. Keep powering down things that we're not using anymore. mission director looks like he's looking up at the screen. Maybe they're looking at a little bit of data that we do not have in front of us. Still standing by for confirmation. But we've heard a few steps go through the process, venting the lander's system, hopefully pulling down data inside of mission control, confirming Athena's status on the surface. And then finally, it sounds like we've heard a couple mentions of pictures. We've shown a couple from that descent stage. And we're just going to keep standing by, looking into Nova Control here in Houston, Texas, just down the street from Johnson Space Center, to find out the situation inside of the IM-2 mission with Athena's touchdown. Again, that was about, nominally, the touchdown time is about 14
Spark
and a half
645
minutes ago.
acknowledged.
Still in contact with the vehicle right now. We know the vehicle has shut down. Its engines are powered down. We are getting acknowledgement transmissions to the vehicle.
All right, team.
Here we
Keep
go.
working the problem. We're shedding power as fast as we can to keep the vehicle in good health. We are generating power. We are communicating through our telemetry radio, and we are working to evaluate exactly what our orientation is on the surface.
Spark 646 acknowledged. Spark 648 acknowledged.
So good confirmations there, right? We know we're getting acknowledgement. We're sending things to the vehicle. We're safing the vehicle. Now it's time to start
Spark
working the challenge of
647
how
acknowledged.
is the vehicle? Which way is it pointed? Earlier in the show, we talked about the different antennas on the vehicle and trying to work those, but we are charging, which is a very key element to this mission. Looks like the room's filling up with our subject matter experts. Just continue working on this challenge to see where we stand.
Spark
Bring them back down.
649 acknowledged.
If you see
DS is back in low rate.
You see folks walking on the bottom right hand of your screen underneath the camera. That's because the room's situational awareness is about a 65-inch TV sitting underneath of there. So what they're pointing at could be data, could be confirmation. A little hard to see from this view, but as you see people exiting the bottom of your screen on the bottom right, there's a television monitor there that's helping them make some decisions. And as we cross over, it's been about 30 minutes since time of ignition for PDI, and we just hit 16 minutes since our nominal landing. If you're just joining us, we know we are sending commands to the vehicle. We have shut off equipment that has not been necessary. We know that we have an engine that has been shut off. We've commanded the vehicle into surface operations. We just heard from Dr. Tim Crane that we are generating power. We're turning things off that are no longer required. We heard one of them being the star tracker. It's one of the tools that we use to figure out Athena's position in space during flight. We're in landed ops. Now we're just standing by to hear what the full situation is. About 16 and a half minutes since nominal landing time, and a little over 31 minutes since Athena commanded her final engine burn.
Spark
PDI.
651 acknowledged.
Like you said, Josh, we are
Order,
communicating.
go ahead and turn on the displays for all the antennas.
We're
Okay, so you're going
communicating.
to see everyone looking up at the screen here. So when they're calling back to order, that's actually
Spark 652
in the
acknowledged.
back left of the bottom right monitor. They're changing screens inside the room, situational awareness, television up front, right in front of the mission director. You just asked to pull up the antenna configurations, trying to figure
Spark
out
653 acknowledged.
which one's pointing back toward Earth, which might be the best one to use. Towards the top of the show and during PDI, when things got a little spicy, we talked about multipath, Leah, and that's something that we expect to happen on the South Pole. It's something we learned from during IM-1, quite frankly, with Odie. Being on the surface and radio waves taking multiple paths to
Spark
get to the same
654 acknowledged.
destination. Multipath exists down on the lunar surface just because there are so many different ways. So during
Spark
IM-1, we were
655
sending out
acknowledged.
signals that were bouncing off the surface, bouncing off of craters, and making their way back to Earth. We took I think it was a Saturday and a Sunday to learn a little bit more about the multipath situation. You mentioned, Leah, Odysseus ended up breaking a leg and then laying down gently on the surface, but that communications does create a problem between multipath and learning about those things. Inside of Intuitive Machines' Lunar Data Network, It's comprised of ground stations all over the globe. The
All right,
largest
Spark,
one of
that's
them
good
being
work so far. What else we got?
the largest ones down in Australia. That is the Parkes Observatory. They call her Miri Yang down there, but that really is what helped us pick up those weak radio signals for IM-1. That's not the dish we're on right now, but it seems like we do have a great connection from the vehicle. I believe that dish we're using right now is GHY6 in Goonhilly, but I don't have that confirmation right in front of me.
AD, this is Prop. Can you confirm what is getting powered down?
Everything we can right now, Prop.
Copy.
They're powering down these systems aboard the lander because it does take quite a bit of energy to land, but we did hear good confirmation that we are also generating power.
Yeah, all these commands that are going to Spark. Spark is code for avionics, right? It's where our power is being allocated on the lander. And we've heard a lot of confirmations of things being turned off. We heard Dr. Crane say we are generating solar power. At last check, we heard Mission Director call out to look at the antenna configuration on the room's situational awareness model screen, and we're still standing by to see where this is going to go.
Yes, power down the Chrosonics until we're ready to use it.
It's about 20 minutes now since our intended landing time today. Again, we were expecting that around 11:30 a.m. Central. Teams in the room in Nova Control, that's here at Intuitive Machines in Houston, Texas, just down the street from Johnson Space Center, continuing to evaluate the status of the spacecraft. Continuing to communicate with the spacecraft itself. And just waiting for potentially a photo that would help us confirm its orientation.
I'm just going to wait one and listen in for a couple cues coming into the studio here. Bear with us, folks. Thanks again, folks, for joining us for the IM-2 mission's landing coverage. I want to go over a few things we do have coming into the studio, into our ear, that we can confirm while the folks are working inside of Mission Control on their own challenges, but a couple things that we do have that we can confirm. Athena is on the surface of the moon. The team is going through the process of powering down systems that are not required. We heard the mission director call out that we do have solar charging, so we continue to hear them in our ear that they're turning off different systems that are not required. We are working to figure out the orientation of the vehicle, which is important because those are our antenna systems that will determine how much signal we're going to have and when we can start bringing down things like vehicle health data and other images that can help us to confirm. But we are communicating with the vehicle. We've heard throughout our intended landing time, through now different call outs, making it to the vehicle. We have direct communications contact, and we would tend to bring out some more information as we continue to assess this dynamic situation inside of Mission Control. We intend to have a press conference at 3 o'clock Central Time. That's 4 o'clock Eastern. We'll do it right over at Johnson Space Center, Leah.
That's right. Thanks for joining us today.
And we'll have plenty of other information if anything else comes out on our website, as well as our X feed to keep everyone up to date. Thanks for joining us, folks.
NASA's Artemis II is the first crewed lunar mission in over 50 years. 4 astronauts will venture around the moon, preparing humanity for a long-term lunar presence for scientific discovery and exploration. The 10-day test flight will demonstrate a range of deep space exploration capabilities with crew. The mission will prove the Orion spacecraft is ready to keep astronauts alive in deep space and allow the crew and ground teams to practice operations essential to the success of future missions. On launch day, the Artemis II crew suits up, undergoes final checks, and rides in the crew transportation vehicles to Launch Pad 39B at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Stacked on the mobile launcher, NASA's 322-foot-tall SLS, or Space Launch System rocket with the Orion spacecraft awaits the crew, having made its 4-mile journey from the vehicle assembly building on the crawler transporter to the pad. The launch team fills the SLS propellant tanks with over 700,000 gallons of liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen and verifies guidance, communications, and avionics. At 12 seconds before liftoff, the hydrogen burn-off igniters fire. About 6 seconds later, the rocket's 4 RS-25 engines ignite. When the countdown reaches 0, the umbilicals retract, giving SLS and the crew in Orion the clearance to begin the journey. The 6 million-pound moon rocket produces 8.8 million pounds of thrust to accelerate towards space. 75% of this power comes from the 2 17-story solid rocket boosters, each producing 3.6 million pounds of thrust. About 2 minutes in, the boosters are released, their solid propellant consumed. The core stage and its RS-25 engines continue to propel Orion and the crew to space. After 3 minutes, the protective fairings surrounding Orion's service module are ejected, exposing its solar arrays. 6 seconds later, the launch abort system is ejected from Orion. The crew has safely reached Earth orbit, though they could still abort using service module engines. About 8 minutes after launch, the SLS core stage engines shut down and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage, or ICPS, and Orion separate from the core stage. Orion and the ICPS are now flying free. Orion's 4 solar arrays deploy, powering the spacecraft and charging its batteries for when it moves out of direct sunlight during the journey to the moon and back. After a 90-minute orbit, the engine of the rocket's upper stage, or ICPS, ignites to raise Orion to a high Earth orbit. The Artemis II crew and Mission Control in Houston then began a nearly 24-hour systems check while the astronauts are still relatively close to Earth, familiarizing themselves with their new home for the next several days. Once in high Earth orbit, Orion separates from the upper stage. The expended ICPS and Orion stage adapter serve as a target for a manual handling test called the Proximity Operations Demonstration, preparing future crews for rendezvous, docking, and undocking with other spacecraft. During the demonstration, Artemis II astronauts use cameras and line of sight through Orion's windows to pilot the spacecraft as they approach and back away, assessing Orion's handling qualities, hardware, and software. Following the demonstration, spacecraft data is collected to verify system performance, such as life support, communications, and navigation, ensuring Orion and the crew are ready for the voyage ahead. About 23 hours later, Orion's service module performs the Translunar Injection Burn, or TLI, pushing Orion out of Earth orbit and on an approximately 4-day trip to the moon. Ultimately, the crew's Figure-8 flight path extends more than 230,000 miles from Earth. During the trip, the astronauts continue to evaluate the spacecraft systems and practice emergency procedures like testing the radiation shelter. The Artemis II crew travels about 4,600 miles beyond the moon, becoming the first humans to lay eyes on the lunar far side in over 50 years. Their observations will help us prepare for future missions at the moon. During this period, there will be an anticipated communication blackout between Mission Control and the spacecraft. As the crew returns from the far side of the moon, Orion is drawn home by Earth's gravity in a free return trajectory, ensuring a fuel-efficient 4-day trip. Before entering the atmosphere, Orion's crew module separates from the service module. 12 thrusters ensure Orion is properly oriented at an altitude of about 75 miles from Earth's surface. Orion and the crew enter Earth's atmosphere at a speed of nearly 25,000 miles per hour. Decelerating at a rate up to 4 times the force of gravity, the crew will feel 4 times heavier than they do on Earth. Orion's heat shield protects the spacecraft from temperatures of about 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, about half as hot as the surface of the sun. To slow its descent, Orion begins a precise deployment sequence of 11 parachutes. 3 forward bay cover parachutes first separate the protective thermal cover that sits over the chutes. 2 drogues slow and stabilize the crew module, then cut free. 3 pilot chutes lift the 3 main parachutes, deployed at an altitude of 9,000 feet and traveling 130 miles per hour. These chutes slow the crew module to a speed of less than 20 miles per hour. After traveling more than 595,000 nautical miles, Orion splashes down in the Pacific Ocean, about 50 nautical miles from the California coast, just 16 minutes after entering Earth's atmosphere. After splashdown, a recovery team that includes the U.S. Navy, Air Force, and NASA approaches Orion. The team ensures it's safe for the crew to exit before divers help the astronauts onto an inflatable front porch, hoist them into helicopters, and fly to the recovery ship. Orion is towed into the ship for its return to Kennedy Space Center. Their mission complete, the crew is flown back to land and step on solid ground for the first time in 10 days. This is Artemis II. Learn more about Artemis at nasa.gov/Artemis.
What President Kennedy said was, we choose to go to the moon and do other things, not because it's easy, but because it's hard.
The cost of failure is much higher than the cost of scrubbing. We have an obligation to get this right.
This is a whole new vehicle, a whole new technology, a whole new purpose of going back to the moon in preparation to go to Mars. And yes, it's hard.
The countdown to T-0 starts approximately 2 days before launch. Teams inside the Launch Control Center have been working around the clock, powering up each section of the rocket and configuring the launch pad to support the 8.8 million pounds of thrust our moon rocket will generate at liftoff.
It is a new creation. It is a new rocket and a new spacecraft to send humans to the moon on the very next flight.
Today, we make history. With the launch of the most powerful rocket the world has ever seen, we are taking the first step in humanity's return to the moon.
I can tell you there's an energy and there's an excitement around the Kennedy Space Center, I would say, across the agency and all around the Space Coast as we get closer and closer to this launch.
This mission will validate that the rocket and capsule do perform as expected before future Artemis missions send astronauts to the lunar surface.
We have worked really hard to get here. The team has done an absolutely outstanding job, and we're up to the challenge, and I'm really looking forward to a successful test flight.
You are looking at the world's most powerful rocket and Orion spacecraft live on Launch Pad 39B. Artemis I embodies the hard work of thousands across the world, determined to explore for the benefit of all. I'm Megan Cruz, and this is NASA astronaut Kayla Barron.
When I first walked up and saw the view from the desk here, I was just blown away.
This is the moment when it comes to the countdown.
Yeah, and then tension starts, and well, let's cross fingers, everything works well. Yeah, tension is rising, and we are fully excited here.
Over the past few years, teams have put in thousands of hours performing simulations and rehearsals to ensure that they are ready for this moment.
As our 0 hour approaches for the Artemis generation, we do have a heightened sense of anticipation, and there's definitely excitement amongst the team members. We've noticed just the overall mood and focus within the team is definitely a positive one.
Now, with all systems configured correctly, the launch director gives the final go for liftoff.
On behalf of all the men and women across our great nation who have worked to bring this hardware together
to make this day possible, and for the Artemis generation, this is for you. At this time, I give you a go to resume count and launch Artemis 1.
This mission goes with a lot of hopes and dreams of a lot of people. It's no longer the Apollo generation. It's the Artemis generation. And that brings a whole new world of discoveries.
T-minus 50 seconds and counting. The Space Launch System is now counting down to liftoff of Orion on its maiden voyage to the moon. And here we go.
10.
Hydrogen burn-off igniters initiate. 7, 6, 5. 4-stage engine start. 3, 2, 1. And liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
Well, if you're just joining us, welcome to NASA's Kennedy Space Center, where we just watched Artemis 1 launch, our first step towards our next adventure into deep space.
With Orion off the ground, Mission Control in Houston takes the reins. Our nation is returning to the moon.
And we have worked hard as a team. You guys have worked hard as a team for this moment. This is your moment. It is not by chance that you are here today. So I want you to look around at this team and know that you have earned it. You have earned your place in the room. You've earned this moment. You have earned your place in history.
The successful launch of SLS is just the beginning. Orion will spend the next several weeks journeying around the moon, sending flight data back to teams here on Earth for real-time analysis. During its mission, Orion reached speeds traveling about 30 times as fast as the speed of sound.
This dramatic video of the Earth-Moon transit that took place showed and punctuated the fact that we were pressing away from our home planet to a distance of some 268,000 miles away from Earth, further than any human-rated spacecraft had ever traveled. For a spacecraft designed to return humans to Earth, eclipsing the mark set by the Apollo 13 vehicle back in 1970.
After several weeks of flight, it was time for Orion to return home.
A half-century later, NASA's newest moon explorer, the Orion spacecraft, is barreling its way back home after circumnavigating the moon and beyond in an elliptical distant retrograde orbit. Now less than 2 hours away from splashing down in the Pacific Ocean west of Baja, California, to complete its shakedown mission.
Like the Apollo missions of the past, Orion will have to endure incredibly high temperatures during re-entry of Earth's atmosphere.
A journey that began with the power of the launch of the Space Launch System 25.5 days ago, about to reach its final minutes in the searing heat of re-entry, where temperatures around Orion will build up to 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
While re-entering Earth's atmosphere, the spacecraft slowed to about 300 miles per hour. As it continued its descent, Orion's parachute system, containing 11 total parachutes, deployed once it reached approximately 9,000 feet and a speed of about 130 miles per hour.
And there it is, high over the Pacific, America's new ticket to ride to the moon and beyond now in view. Orion under its chutes descending toward splashdown.
These parachutes help slow the crew module to a much more manageable speed, roughly 20 miles per hour, for a water landing off the coast of California.
Splashdown. From Tranquility Base to Taurus Littrow to the tranquil waters of the Pacific, the latest chapter of NASA's journey to the moon comes to a close. Orion, back on Earth.
We've got a perfect view, a front row seat to the Orion splashdown. And it's simply beautiful out here. That is a human-rated capsule that went around the moon and returned and is now in the Pacific Ocean.
I think I can speak for the whole dive team that we're honored to be part of history and to be part of something so monumentous, and just ready and excited to go out and do this.
When Orion was deemed safe to approach, team members jumped into the water and attached hardware that steadied the capsule.
What we do at NASA really is all about collaborations, and the collaborations that we've had with the Department of Defense in particular over the past many years, their hard work and their dedication as they went through a great deal of planning, hardware development and processes, and a lot of practicing to get to this point and make it look easy.
And that team, made of a combination of NASA and Department of Defense personnel, has put in years of work to make sure that they were ready.
Melissa Jones, the recovery director, just came from outside the ship's control center where she was monitoring and, of course, managing her team in the midst of this recovery. So, Melissa, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's been a long time coming. We've been working this mission for a while, and we've done a ton of training. And every time you do training with a mock-up capsule, you don't have any of that. You don't have parachutes. You don't hear it coming back to the atmosphere, the sonic booms and all of that kind of stuff. And today that actually happened. It's just amazing.
This mission, this spacecraft and this team exceeded all expectations. For the last 25 and a half days, we've been every day looking ahead to the next flight to see how we can improve on where we are today so that we can fly a safe and successful mission with our astronauts next time around.
Once stabilized, the team secured the spacecraft with hardware and rope assemblies and towed it to the Navy ship. The dive team then connected Orion to a series of ropes from inside the back of the ship, known as the well deck, to safely and securely pull the capsule inside. With Orion safely secured inside the ship, teams made their way to Naval Base San Diego, where the capsule was offloaded and prepped for its cross-country trip back to its home base, Kennedy Space Center.
This is really the start of a campaign of several missions to get humans back to the moon and beyond to Mars. So there's still a lot to be done, and this is just the beginning.
Kennedy just stunned everybody with the Apollo generation.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out.
And said that we were going to achieve what we thought was impossible.
Of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
Many things have happened since, but we knew we were going back. This is the program of going back to the moon to learn, to live, to invent, to create in order to explore beyond. Oh, it's a new day. A new day has dawned, and Artemis generation is taking us there.
The little red light is on.
You're rolling.
All right.
Number one.
Most kids, you start thinking at an early age, as soon as you look in the sky at night and you see stars, and you think, what would it be like to be up there?
No matter where we grow up, everybody looks up at the sky and says, what else is out there?
I started saying I wanted to be an astronaut when I was 5 years old, according to my mom.
It was the beginning of our astronauts making their way up to the moon. I remember coming back like, what is this? How do I go do this? This looks like fun.
I looked at what NASA was doing. I was like, I want to be an astronaut. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what happened.
I got into the Navy test pilot school and then started to apply to NASA.
There's like 6,000 people that applied for, 15 slots. And I interviewed 4 times over 12 years.
I applied multiple times over 13 years and interviewed 5 times before I was selected.
Well, I did submit 7 applications along the way, but I got rejected by NASA 7 times, but the 8th time.
And the 4th time, I got a phone call that said, if you're still interested in being an astronaut, we'd like you to come to Houston.
Finally, it's launch day.
Launching to space, of course, was a momentous experience.
You see that this rocket is a living, breathing beast. The thing is alive, and it wants to go.
It suddenly feels like it's real.
First thing, you're strapped into the space shuttle on the launch pad,
and I can say sitting in the rocket, getting ready for launch, you're anxious and you're excited.
And waiting for countdown, focusing and doing your checklist, focusing on your procedure.
At the moment, of launch, you're quite prepared.
It lights off and you feel the rumble and then you start to move, and that constant smooth acceleration pulling you back in the seat.
And you feel like you're just in a car wreck because the solid rocket boosters light off and they give you a kick in the backside like you were just rear-ended at a stop sign, literally.
There's just nothing subtle or nice about it.
There was the vibration, the pressure, the acceleration, the pressure in your seat.
I distinctly remember the point when I stopped and thought, I did it. I'm here. My goal was to be an astronaut, and now I'm in space.
As a kid, you fantasize about spreading your arms and flying among the clouds and that kind of stuff. That's what we're doing. Floating is very cool.
It's fun to watch new astronauts show up in space too, because they creep around. We would joke like space mice, very timid, very controlled.
Being weightless the first few days is horrible. I mean, it's really neat to see something floating in front of you. It's really horrible to feel like you're going to throw up all the time. And then as you start to get into it, you start to realize that the human's an incredibly adaptive machine, and weightlessness is really, really well suited for us.
You know, pretty soon you're going into a hatchway and you come through and you kind of push off on both sides and you go zipping down the middle and you're turning right at the end. So you reach out, grab a handrail.
But it also brings out your inner 5-year-old, or I say that it is the source of all stupid astronaut tricks.
It's as fun as you think it would be, only better. I think I told my wife that I thought it was a burrito of awesomeness smothered in awesome sauce, because I don't have a very big vocabulary, so I tried to use the biggest, most impactful words I could.
Everybody's a superhero. You're not floating, you're flying.
So the International Space Station, being only 250 miles above Earth, we call it the proving ground for a lot of science. It is a national orbiting laboratory for the United States, and we do have hundreds of science experiments going on at any time.
We're doing this amazing science up there. It is also absolutely the most wonderful observatory. And certainly for an Earth-facing observatory, the cupola module, this big bay window, that we have facing Earth, is the place to be.
I got visited by 3 space shuttles. Several of the crew members never looked outside the cupola before. I would bring them one at a time to the cupola. Tell them to close their eyes, open up all the windows, the shutters on the windows, and then tell them to open up their eyes.
Cerebrally, I knew that this was going to be a life-changing experience. I knew that the view was going to be amazing.
And I will never forget that sight. The thin blue line of the atmosphere, the curve of the horizon, and that's when it became real. Really, at a gut level, I'm actually in space. We are on orbit. This is not a sim.
This is my eyes looking through glass at Earth from space. It was almost overwhelming.
And so I think it's kind of overload for your brain and processing all of that at once, because it just isn't used to that.
It's really hard to describe something like that, because it's not just cerebral, it's emotional, it's kind of all encompassing. My heart was racing. You couldn't wipe the smile off of my face. It was really amazing.
I just was, feeling something as I was staring at this view of the whole thing, and it moved me to tears unknowingly. So.
In that instant, when you're overwhelmed with that vista, when your eyes see nothing but the beauty of the Earth, every single crew member that I brought in there for that exposure cried. It is heart-stopping. It is soul-pounding. It is breathtaking.
I mean,
It was ridiculous. I'd never imagined in my entire life getting to see something that beautiful. It was so foreign for the human mind to look at that, to see the Earth highlighted that way.
Well, I don't think anything prepares you for how crystal clear it is. I knew the colors, but they just seemed different to me. They seemed more vibrant, more translucent.
I've never seen those colors here on Earth. These pearlescent yellows and peaches that form when you're looking at a body of water with the sun angle. It's just amazing.
I just took a pencil and I drew like 15 curved lines, and I just wrote light blue, darker blue, pink, purple, dark purple, all the way down to the surface of the Earth at sunset, because the scale of looking at a sun refracting through the atmosphere, it blew me away, okay? And no picture captures that. There's no high enough dynamic range of a photo to capture what the human can see.
How in the world am I gonna describe this? There's no words. There's no picture I could take to do it justice. There's no watercolors that I could put on paper to come close to the vividness, the ever-changing picture that I see staring at this planet.
And I think that's the challenge of really trying to express just what ran through my mind when I'd look out there, because my mind would just race.
It's like a work of art out the window there, and it surprises you every time you look at it. One of the most impressive things was watching thunderstorms, storm activity moving around the planet.
You can see its path propagating around, and you have these big flashes all over the place.
This one storm covering all the U.S. and lightning flashing off all over, nonstop.
It's like watching neurons firing in a brain. These tentacles of light that are just connecting and traveling. Yeah, it might be starting over Florida, but it's like moving across the ocean to Africa as far as you can see. And that was, I remember floating there just thinking about, oh my gosh, everything is connected.
We got to see some interesting things up there. One was Hurricane Dorian, a Category 5 hurricane with such a well-formed eye. When you look down at it, flying over in the station, it doesn't even look like it's moving, but the power that's at the center of that storm and what havoc that storm is wreaking on everybody on the ground.
You look at it in terror, really, because all the people that are endangered underneath, but just the immensity of power that Mother Nature brings.
A hurricane, a thunderstorm, everywhere you look, there is the environment doing something crazy. So we're coming up over Brazil, about to go across into the Atlantic Ocean, and looking out on the horizon, I saw looked kind of brown. I'd never seen that really from the space station, and I instantly, what did I think? Human interaction pollution, for sure. It's just awful looking, it's terrible. But as we went over the Atlantic, it kind of got thicker and thicker and thicker. It was a sandstorm in the Sahara Desert, blowing this huge plume of sand up into the atmosphere, crossing the Atlantic Ocean and coming down in Brazil. That is crazy. If that doesn't change the way you think about the planet, absolutely nothing will.
What struck me was when we looked at natural disasters, you see a flood, and you really can't pick out where they are on Earth. But when you see it from space, you realize that the effects of these natural disasters really hit everybody equally. And it really gives you this perspective that, first of all, we're all in this together, and that the world is very small.
What has always struck me every time I went there is how beautiful the Earth is, how fragile it looks, how alive it obviously is with the clouds, the water. It's like it's breathing.
When you first look at Earth, you may say, wow, that's a continent. And then you look at it again the next day and you say, wow, there are mountain ranges. And then you look at it again the next day and it's like, oh, I can see synclines and anticlines in the geologic structure.
You could see the Nile River and the Nile Delta so clearly, the Red Sea. And for me, that was just amazing to look down. You could see the Jordan River, the Sea of Galilee, the Dead Sea. And I was just thinking, this is where all this took place.
The color palette is hard to compare. I mean, all these reds and oranges, and so the dunes all over in Central Africa and in Saudi Arabia, you have these so many different textures.
And you can almost pick out where you are over the earth because Australia's tans are different than African tans.
Every piece of the earth has its own tone, if you want. So you become very acquainted with the earth from a big picture point of view.
And you saw just the beauty of the landscape and the mountains and the deserts, and you start to think of how they were formed. You realize just how special the place we are is, and you feel that connection.
So when you look at the earth from that vantage point, I know others have said this, you don't see the borders. You don't see political borders, you hardly see geographical borders.
You know, we're so used to looking at maps or globes. In low Earth orbit, you don't see a globe. And from no distance do you see the different colors for countries so that it makes them easy to distinguish.
I was looking for all the little pink and green countries when I was looking at Earth. Where's Uganda? It's supposed to be pink on the atlas.
You know, you don't see those geopolitical boundaries, all of the man-made boundaries that we've imposed upon ourselves as humans. You don't see any of that from space.
It's just you and your team, and you're trying to make an impact on us evolving into something more. You forget about the politics. You forget about daily life that plagues us here on the ground, that colors our perceptions because you're insulated from it.
And you just feel this sense of commonality more, and something that unites us all, and just that we're all human.
Flying over Africa in the daytime with the intense sunlight so much of the time, you don't really see much detail. It's so bright. But at night, when it's illuminated by starlight or moonlight, you really see a lot, and it's just fascinating.
And you don't quite see the same texture, but you see mankind's influence on the planet.
You get these beautiful, twinkly city lights.
And they represent human sprawl, which isn't necessarily bad, but it is incredibly beautiful from space.
I love looking at the atmosphere at night when you have that air glow, and sometimes it was a bit green, and then you have the aurora dancing around.
And we were flying into this astonishing aurora, this rippling, pulsing river of green that's down below us, the red that is stretching up to our altitude. It's like, it was just breathtaking.
Auroras, the presence of humans at night, it's obvious with the lights. But is the death around the earth that's startling? How this beautiful, shining oasis of life is there naked in the middle of pitch black death, the vacuum of space.
Definitely look up and see the stars like you have never seen them before. I mean, the Milky Way is just stunning.
There's many things in the cosmos to gaze at it. For example, the Magellanic Clouds. Those show up really bright and vivid because you don't have atmospheric scattering. You can see Andromeda, the spiral galaxy of Andromeda.
Of course, the lights don't flicker. They're steady because they're not coming through the dust and coming through the atmosphere. And then as you really adjust, you start to sense the very subtle colors that are in the stars. A little bit of reddish, a little bit of bluish, blue-white.
Just all the colors in the light come out you know, in that depth of space as well.
I could all of a sudden detect depth. Now, I couldn't tell you how much, but it's light years, right? And it's like, whoa, I can somehow tell that that star is closer than that star. And that was something that knocked my socks off. And I thought, nobody told me about this.
I don't think I had thought before going up there about how many stars you see, you know, the density of stars.
You see so many stars, it becomes hard to pick out constellations. People ask if there's aliens, and I'm like, of course there are aliens. Look at all those stars. There's got to be.
It's just so vast and infinite that I don't know what else to say about that.
I remember using like the 800 millimeter lens and just really zooming into places. And you know, you still can't see people walking around or anything, but you see impacts of things. And you realize that a lot of times we have to pull way back. You know, you have to pull way back and see the big picture of it.
You realize just how small you are, because you at times struggle to find evidence of human activity down there. You can go over massive swaths of the earth and not see a trace of any human impact. Or you can go over other swaths and you can see dramatic impact.
Frequently in the summertime, there's a lot of fires in Africa. You see all of those plumes of smoke heading west across the Atlantic.
You fly over South America and you see, you know, widespread deforestation, and you know the impact that that has. You can almost get a sense of the balance of, you know, how nature is trying to balance all the inputs and the outputs and have a stable system. And you can see our effect on it.
To me, it started to make me understand that everything is connected. What is happening in the ocean over here can affect what is happening on land over here. It's just all one being, thing, and it's all interconnected.
You can see combat. I mean, we were two countries were at war, and you could very easily see missiles being shot. They just look like little tiny traces of light. You can see all that stuff. So to me, I didn't see one unified human civilization. You certainly see one unified planet cruising around the sun, and that is a unique perspective.
But during my time on space station, I had the chance to do a spacewalk, put on a spacesuit and go outside. And that's a very special experience for any astronaut.
You're inside the space station or the shuttle, and now you put on a suit and go outside. It's like there is an elevation and risk when you do that, but it is a bit thrilling.
Spacewalks always seem to be very busy and task-focused events where I got to do this and I got to move over here and do this.
And then you just have to not think about where you are. Just concentrate on getting the job done. What's the big picture?
Rarely did you have a minute where you could just say, just take a minute and enjoy the view. But, you know, there were those minutes every once in a while. And the view from outside the spacecraft, you know, with that full panoramic vision through your helmet visor was just incredible.
It's a very disturbing view, looking down about 240 miles at the Earth going by at, 17,000 miles an hour. It's like, oh boy.
I just watched the Earth going by below me, and I only had this, thin visor separating me from a very unsurvivable atmosphere. And my feet were dangling. I remember, not just through my visor, but looking down and you just see feet and then Earth, and you're holding onto the space station. And it was just incredible. Everything looked so large.
The colors are even more vibrant. And I think also just mentally, psychologically realizing that, there's nothing between the vacuum of space except for this spacesuit and your visor.
I remember thinking that coming out like that the world would just open up around me. And the view, for some reason, seems bigger than what you have when you're looking through the windows of a spacecraft.
I mean, it wasn't like Earth is over there. It wasn't small. It was like it took up your entire, visor and all as far as you could see, and just watching it come over Earth and just how large Earth was compared to from our perspective.
But oh my gosh, you see Earth and you see your glowing station around you, and you realize, okay, I gotta stop looking at this stuff because it becomes a distraction to the work that you're doing out there.
So I always kid those astronauts that don't do the spacewalks. I said, the view from inside here through this flat window is pretty good, The view from outside is just amazing.
And the great thing about living on Space Station, I loved every minute of it. I had a countdown going, but it was, oh no, I only have 2 months left.
All right, one last look at the Earth. This is some good news. The Earth is still beautiful. An Earth in crisis is still an Earth worth returning to.
Life seems extremely busy, and the days start flying by, and before you know it, it's over.
As it drew to a close, I think I was more feeling as though, did you do enough to capture this so that you can share it when you get home? And so that you can light those fires in people as you go around and talk about this and try to, ignite the passion in kids just like I had ignited for me as a kid.
And you're back on the ground, and somebody else is doing the job up there now. It makes you feel like, this is a really big thing that we're a part of, and I'm fortunate to play my part.
It is the fact that going to space and seeing the Earth from that vantage point has a life-changing effect on most of us.
It takes a lot of energy to describe what it's like up there, because there's so much of your emotion built into it.
I think the best way to describe it is that your viewpoint changes. That you can look at the same thing, but it changes the lens through which you see it.
And that acute concrete realization that we belong to Earth and not vice versa, it's kind of a mental shift to see that we just nowhere else we could go.
I think if you're not a conservationist before you go to space, you're at least partly a conservationist when you come back, because when you see how thin that atmosphere is, that protective layer that we have here, you think, wow, we really have to take care of this because it does look so fragile from space.
I think I felt that need to protect it even before leaving it, but it definitely does resonate even more loudly now, having seen it myself, and how stunning and beautiful it is. All of those unique ecosystems, everything's connected, the land masses and the ocean masses and the atmosphere, and we are all in it together. We are all down there. And so I think that's the most important thing that I would encourage people to think about, that perspective.
I think you get a sense of preservation of I don't want this to go away, and I don't want to be the only one to see this. And there are so many people that need to see it, but only a handful will in this lifetime.
I remember coming back from all my missions with that sense that, we're all connected, we're all people. And I thought about, why is it that we do have conflicts? What is that separates us from one another?
If you could get 7 billion people to go up there and look down, for just even 30 seconds, you would change them, all of them, forever. They wouldn't all come back and be friends. They wouldn't all come back and tear down border walls and things like that. But you would change all of them, and you would change them all for the better, and they would have a different view of the planet.
I think if people that can lift their eyes up and see the bigger picture, whether it's from orbit or even just understanding the different sides, maybe spending more time listening, rather than shouting.
And that's what I want people to find. I absolutely found that in the experience I had in space, in the simple facts of us living on a planet and all being Earthlings, and the only border that matters is that thin blue line.